life seems different now to me because of what I've been through. So, but not in a bad way necessarily, just in a way that I need to embrace it very meaningfully and intentionally. And I feel a lot of gratitude every day. And I feel like I want to spread a message very intentionally.
Welcome to Connecting with Coincidence. I am your host, Bernard Beitman, MD, and I study meaningful coincidences. And they happen a lot. And there's all kinds of ways that I find that people are noticing them. And sometimes it takes listening to a show like this or reading a book like Meaningful Coincidences, my book, Meaningful Coincidences, that alerts people to the idea that they're around and they can be very useful to you. So consider purchasing my book, subscribe to this channel where we keep talking with people about their own synchronicities, coincidence, serendipities. Please like what we're doing. It helps the algorithm, it tickles it, and gets more people to pay attention to meaningful coincidences, and send me some comments. So what do you do if you have a serial coincidence and death is knocking on your door, say several times, all in the same kind of time frame? What do you do? Well, we have a person today who's going to tell us a little bit about what she did. She is Dr. Jennifer Guttman. She has a doctorate in clinical psychology. She launched a motivational brand called Sustainable Life Satisfaction. She produced a YouTube series, a course, and a workbook based on this method. This very year, her book, Beyond Happiness, The 6 Secrets of Life Satisfaction, was published by Post Hill Press. She is a regular contributor to Psychology Today, as I am. She has a blog. I have a blog. She has written for national news outlets like the Washington Post and Newsweek, and has been a guest on several network television programs, including ABC News, and has been featured on dozens of podcasts. She has an active and robust cognitive behavioral practice. Welcome to Connecting with Coincidence, Dr. Jennifer Guttman.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, I'm glad you are. And however we got together, which might have been my error, it's not an error.
The coincidence.
It's a coincidence. I mean, we don't know how it happened. That's what makes it a coincidence. Well, you have a very poignant story to tell us, a serial coincidence in which death knocked 3 times. So could you tell us about that story?
Sure. In a very short period of time, about a year and a half, I discovered that my son had a life-threatening illness that required surgery, followed by my finding out that I had a life-threatening illness. And then following that, my father passed away. These all happened in quick succession. After these events, I settled my children back in sleepaway camp. It was the summer. And I bought a one-way ticket to Europe, packed some things into a carry-on, and went without any real purpose other than to figure out how to regain a sense of optimism and hope. While I was in Europe and wandering around, I was thinking about what was I searching for? What did I want to do? What was I going to look forward to? What was I looking for the rest of my life, since everything seemed so fragile at the time, and I was despairing. And I realized that I wasn't trying to find happiness at that time. Happiness seemed so incongruous with what I had just been through. What I was searching for instead was satisfaction. And I realized that satisfaction in certain moments is what had kept me going during all of these events. And if I wanted to regain a sense of satisfaction, then I wanted to understand it better. I wanted to embrace it and dissect it. And so it was on that trip that the kernels of what would become the sustainable life satisfaction method was born. When I look back at that, I left Europe with a mission. And it was like I had found a guide to change my perspective on how to look at all of these events that had happened to me that was going to give me new purpose. It gave me now meaning to turn my distress into something else, something that was going to be like my, my light. And that turned the chaos that I was feeling into meaning. It turned it into, it gave me some footing. It made me feel moored again. And I think that helped me feel some sense of clarification. And in that way, I think that those coincidences and me observing what it was doing for me ended up pulling me out of the despair.
Well, you did something that a lot of people may not have done. I'm taking a one-way trip to Europe and see what happens. What that fits with the general idea of what increases coincidences. That is when there is a breakdown in the structure of your life. When life is not the same as it was yesterday. It opens up new possibilities when the basic web of your current reality gets torn. Coincidences fly through those tears in the web if you're paying attention to them. And then to add to all the disarray that was created by death knocking on your door 3 times, which is enough of a disturbance in your regular reality, you made it even more disturbed, opening up the possibility for more possibilities by just taking a one-way ticket to Europe, which is kind of a big place. You got to pick some place to go. So what I'm curious about, Jennifer, is the events that led to your finding the clues to the satisfaction work that you ended up as finding a purpose for yourself.
I find a lot of information in silence. A lot of information in silence. One of the reasons that I picked Europe was because it was a place where I wasn't going to be distracted, and because I am very passionate about my work and my practice, I needed to go to a place where I wasn't going to be uh, tempted to just throw myself back into the work that I was already doing. I wanted to find some kind of meaning in what had happened. So many things had happened that were so upsetting in such quick succession. If I was going to have meaning, throwing myself back into my practice wasn't going to give me that. If I went away, then I was going to be able to sit with my thoughts, and that's what I was looking for. And it was going to allow me that meditative time. While I was meditating on what had helped me through and breaking down satisfaction, I looked at what were the skills that kept me bouncing back after each one of these things. I found out that my son had a life-threatening illness. What had kept me going during that time, despite doctors for 9 years telling me that he wasn't sick, and me fighting with doctors for 9 years, saying to them, he actually is sick, even though you're telling me he's not. And it was a 9-year journey before we got to a doctor that believed me, and he did indeed need heart surgery for this. So what was the skills that kept me bouncing back and persevering? And then immediately following that, what was the skills that allowed me to decide what the best treatment was for my life-threatening illness? And then what was the skills that helped me bounce back after my father's passing? When all of these things happened in such quick succession, any one of them could have laid me down. And as I was thinking about that, I realized that a lot of it was quieting the noise in my mind, but what were the specific skills? And as I was thinking about that, I realized that I avoided assumptions. I needed to avoid assumptions because if I had allowed myself to fall into assumptions about whether my son was going to die or whether I was going to die or whether uh, the doctors were saying lots of things about what was going on, and if I was going to allow that noise to seep into my brain, it was going to reduce my clarity of thought. So avoiding assumptions became one of the skills in sustainable life satisfaction. Reducing people pleasing behaviors. All of my friends and family were saying, listen to the doctors, do what the doctors say, and I was definitely not doing that. So reducing people pleasing behaviors, again, reducing the noise so I could listen to my own voice, became one of the sustainable life satisfaction techniques. And then I found that by avoiding assumptions and reducing people pleasing behaviors, I was better able to make decisions. So making decisions and the importance of making decisions became one of the sustainable life satisfaction techniques, because that is critical. And then I found that being able to move through discomfort and the unknown, I call it facing fears as a sustainable life satisfaction. One of the, and I don't mean running into traffic. I mean like breaking out of your comfort zone, breaking out of homeostasis, doing things that you don't feel comfortable doing, which was critical during that time. And then the next one was closing out tasks because I had to follow through, whether it was when I was finally in Colorado getting the final diagnosis for my son when we had flown all the way there from New York and deciding that I didn't want to have the heart surgery in Colorado. I wanted to have it in Boston, and I had to close trying to find and get the surgeon to agree to do the surgery in Boston, but close out that task. And realizing that if you have quieted your voice enough to hear your voice and not anybody else, you're more likely to close tasks that have a meaningful and authentic feel to you than you are to close tasks that are based on the shoulds that other people think you should close, which is why it's so important to focus on what's meaningful to you to close. And that became one of them. And then the last one is self-care and active self-reinforcement, because if I hadn't during that period of time focused at all on myself and taking care of myself, I don't think that I would have made it through. And all of that coalesced, I realized, in some defiant resilience. And what I talk about at the end of my book is that all of this does lead to resilience. And when you think about coincidences or synchronicity, I do believe that it's the quiet and the self-awareness that leads to life satisfaction and resilience and being able to face adversity. So it's not surprising that at the end of my book, I talk about how it all led me, and all of these skill sets lead you to become a more resilient person.
That's an excellent list. And there's a key question that I have, and maybe others do too, the meditation, quiet mind. How did you quiet your mind?
I find that usually, I mean, I quiet my mind in two ways. I can quiet my mind by, I find it very easy to quiet my mind in a car, because if I'm in a car alone, I don't turn on any music. I just drive, and then eventually whatever I've been thinking about just stops, and then I notice that my mind just sort of goes, and it goes to very, very creative and interesting places. And I'm always fascinated by what thoughts just come, as long as I attend to them. And the key is attending to them, that I'm paying very close attention to what thoughts float around in my mind and that I'm not ignoring them, and intentionally not drown them out with music or a podcast or anything. I like intentionally just try to listen to the thoughts that are running through my mind. If I'm not going to be able to be in a car, then I will sit quietly in a room for 10 minutes and do the same thing. The initial thoughts are about what's happening in my day, but once those thoughts passed, then the creative thoughts, the other thoughts start to come. And within those thoughts are very interesting material that I would not have access to if I didn't allow myself those moments of just sitting there and allowing my brain to literally roam. I feel sometimes like my brain is in like a big field and it's just sort of bouncing around in the big field, going from thought to thought to thought. Sometimes they're related, sometimes they're not related, but they are all meaningful.
How do you decide when you have a bunch of thoughts running around in the field of your mind? How do you decide which cows to pay attention to and lasso cowboy?
But I mean, for me, I think they all are. um, I I don't think that when humans have thoughts in that state that any of them should be ignored. I think that we should attend to what thoughts we have. I think that it's important to hone our ability to recognize when we're in a negative self-talk space or when we're in an impulsive state, make sure that we've gone into a deeper space of intuition before we're paying attention to those thoughts. And I've been doing this for a long time, so I know when I'm in that creative space where the thoughts that are bouncing around are ones that are actually going to be useful to me. But I think when I initially sit down, I'm thinking about work, I'm thinking about, things that may not be as productive. And that after I get underneath that layer, whatever's going on in my mind, those are valuable once I get to the deeper layer. I may not know why they're valuable yet, but I know to put pins in them.
Well, you've practiced this for a long time now. So,
Yeah.
and when I ask from a naive perspective, uh, how do you know which ideas to pay attention to? Because there can be a lot. And what you do, you've recognized ones where there are shoulds, where there's negative self-talk. You can recognize them if and when they're coming up, which I imagine they're not coming up much for Jennifer Guttman anymore, because you've learned to be able to scoot them away when they do show up. So you're able to get rid of two very important ones, or at least cast them aside easily. And then that's a big help. And then you have other thoughts coming in, and somehow that whole compendium of other thoughts, that has lots, there could be lots of them, have somehow sorted themselves out. So I'm guessing so that they're all relevant in some form or other to your life. That's pretty amazing, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what you said is right. I have like worked too. Like it's like a tuning fork or exercising a muscle. You practice it and you practice it and you learn like, okay, this bunch is negative self-talk. This bunch would be impulsive actions. This bunch is like related to like ineffective and related to my childhood. So these are all this is like I have to like peel all this away. I have to get deeper. And then it really is when you get to a space where you're thinking about things that wouldn't have occurred to you. So the other things, the negative self-talk, the impulsive, the stuff from the past, there's not a ton of, at least for me, there's not a ton of creativity in there. There's not a lot of like aha in those. It's when I get to the layer of like, oh, or aha, or oh, I hadn't thought of that, that I know that I'm in that space where I'm making connections that I wouldn't have made in these like upper layers. And when I was doing it earlier, I could get like stuck up there for longer. Now I can get to that aha phase faster. But it's when I get to that place where I'm like, oh, I didn't think of that, or oh, that would be interesting, or that path would be interesting, or I hadn't considered doing it that way. that's when I know, because it wouldn't have occurred, and there's nothing that's impulsive about it. It's practical, or it makes sense to consider doing it that way. It's discerning, and it's in that way it's creative, and I feel like I got like unblocked basically. Um and there's meaning in it. So I do think that it's a feeling where it's like a whole bunch of thoughts that like wouldn't have occurred to me if I was really tied or grounded to like conscious intention, or really grounded to the environment. Is that I'm just like free floating around in this sort of intuitive space.
I I really appreciate the list because there's a lot of stuff, including intention and the current environment, which is part of a list that you have developed of of thoughts with our accompanying emotions that you have learned to disregard so that you can get to almost sounds like a cavern, a space where there's like, I mean, I'll call them bats are floating around in this cave, and they're different colors, and they're flying in different ways, and you can find ones, all of them seem relevant, but somehow you discern in all those thoughts which ones to pay attention to at any one moment, and then you can go from that to how that might be a practical application in your life.
Mhm.
That's this cave is got got a lot of stuff in it, if I can use that metaphor with you, because it sounds like it's a space. That that space has something else you mentioned in it, a voice that talks to you. And that
Mhm.
seems from your description a little different from the thoughts floating around like the bats, maybe. There's something that is talking too. And how does that voice fit into whatever metaphor seems to fit for you?
I I mean, I'm not sure how to articulate that exactly, because it's I mean, it's very clear to me which things, like I know which things I want to, whether it's like the thought or a voice, I know which things, when I'm done thinking about it, which things I want to go run and write down, because I want to do something about them soon or think more about it. And I know which things I'm not sure what I want to do with, and I can put a pin in it. And that it needs more processing, or I need like it's not meaningful enough to me yet. Like it's still in its nascent stage, or it's still amorphous to me. And so whether it's that that's sort of an amalgamous thought, and that what's more the voice is the things that I want to go write down. I mean, that may be the differentiator, but there is a difference between the things that I want to write down and start to think about how I might want to execute or integrate them, versus the things that feel more amalgamous, where I'm like, this isn't like a fully formed thing. This is nascent, and it's just beginning to evolve in my mind, and I don't know exactly where it's going.
I like put a pin in it. Uh, put put a pin in. Okay, I'll come back to you,
Yeah.
butterfly. Right now, just stay there, and I'll come back to you. But these other ones, I'm going to go capture out
Right.
there, and I'm going to write them down. You did mention listening to your internal voice early in your description, and I think it's really important for some of us who want to is to be able to discern the inner voice that is relevant to the current circumstance. So I'll ask again in the middle of this, there's the ones, the nascent ones, the ones you're going to write down. But where does the listening to a voice, where does the voice play a part in this, or am I missing something?
I think when I say like quiet the noise or listen to your voice, it has to do with like observing yourself in a way that is authentic, and that so that you can like hear your authentic voice, so that's not polluted by the outside world, whether you're hearing your voice by that's like meaning just like the articulation of your thoughts, or like however you want each individual person wants to conceptualize it, whether they conceptualize it as that the voice is the articulation of what they're thinking. But the key to it is that it's quieting the outside noise enough so that they can hear what they're personally thinking without it being impacted by everything they're hearing on the outside. So, because I think that our personal decision making is so much more effective if we are filtering it through our own lens and not through the lens of so many other people. And that is the best way for us to make liberated and aware decisions. Uh, and so that's what I mean by like the voice. It's the articulation of our authentic thoughts.
Yeah, it's we can say a thought, but it's a thought expressing itself,
Yes.
and that could be in a term listening to it, but it's that's the inner voice is those thoughts
Exactly.
to be heard. Now, you mentioned observing them, observing these thoughts, and observing the voice that comes from them. What do you mean? What's the observer in there?
So when I talk to my clients, one of the things that I suggest to them when they're struggling with a lot of this is that they imagine themselves, literally imagine, visualize leaving their bodies and watching themselves as objectively as possible interact in the world, and see if they can detach from the environmental stuff and see if they can like wonder about what's going on in a less with more loosely attached to the environment. And that's what I would consider the observing self, like watching what's happening, but more loosely attached to the environment, so that their self is very attached emotionally and physically to everything that's going on in the environment. And that makes it hard to be at all objective about what's happening, and that then interferes with your intuition. But if you can step out of yourself for a minute and watch yourself interact and watch what's going on, then you have the potential to more critically and intuitively assess what's happening. So I try to give them a visualization exercise to step aside, watch what's going on, and then see if you can get yourself to notice anything about what's going on that you find of interest, or that sparks a thought or sparks something that you might not have noticed while just being in the situation.
You use this word intuition. That's part of what you're talking about, I think, is to be able to be more open to your own inner teaching, like tuition, pay for school, that's inside intuition. It's kind of a play on that idea, but it is an important part of being able to proceed well in life. Is how do you think about intuition?
I think intuition is about being guided by your like gut. So it's like, and it's liberating in that it's having faith in a belief that you can figure out what you want to do based on either some information that you have like just know from things that have happened because you've picked them up from things that have happened in the universe, or because of experience, or because of whatever, but you've coalesced those into having a sense of what you feel like is the best path forward. And that may not all be grounded in, oh, I had this experience and this experience and this experience. It can also be reflected in just things that you have picked up um, amorphously from just being a person in the universe. And some of it may be like not explainable. You know, you can't always explain every single thing that's happened to you. And so because you can't explain single thing that's happened to you, some of it is, you know, like just enters the fabric of your being. And that also then contributes to how you intuit, how you want to move forward in your life.
And where where does the synchronicity play a role, do you think, in intuitive decision making and being guided?
I think being observing, aware, mindful, paying attention to all of the things in the environment that are going on to catch incidences of synchronicity is critically important. And that blindness, if you're blind to them, then you're missing out on very important information. So I'm like a meaning seeker, or I would consider myself a meaning seeker. So I if I don't understand why something didn't work out the way that I might have thought that it would work out, or the way that would have made sense for it to work out, the way that I look at it is that I'll understand later. And that I don't know when later will be, but I will understand later. And then what's required of me is just to have the patience to wait until I understand, however long that may be, and B, the awareness of my surroundings enough so that I catch whenever it is that that meaning shows itself to me. And that has, you know, been an extremely useful tool, because I feel like I've learned so much about life from paying that much attention to details uh, about everything that's happening in my surroundings and people, and like nuance, by doing that. And within all of that, I have found reasons for why things that end up being what makes as meaning, so that, you know, it ends up like, oh, this is how these things were related, even though there's this time lapse. Like, this is the relationship between these things.
Yeah. Um, you know, there's a there's part of your story that I'm still curious about, that you went to Europe. I mean, didn't and I'd like to know where, if you tell us, but you went to Europe to be able to open up yourself to understanding your own messages to yourself, so that you could better guide yourself into life satisfaction. There had to be some strange things that happened to you. You weren't just being quiet the whole time. You were also interacting with people sometimes. And I wonder if you could tell us some of the interactions that you experienced in Europe that helped you on your journey to where you are now.
It wasn't really the interactions, it was the things that I did.
Well, okay.
So the like something that stands out in my mind in particular was that, so I went to Salzburg, and I went to a place in Salzburg called the Trick Castle. And the Trick Castle was a castle built by, I don't remember what king or prince. And basically how the trick castle works is that you walk around in the gardens, and at different points when you're not expecting it, it sprays water on you.
It sprays water on you.
Yep. And you have no idea when you're walking in this it's beautiful, like so beautiful. I can't describe how beautiful it is, but you have no idea. And it's not like an amusement park. We're talking about something that's elegant and beautiful, stunning. And it's such an oxymoron because it's this beautiful, beautiful garden and huge, and you have no idea when you're going to pass by something that is going to spray you with water. And there was something about that experience that was very profound to me. And it had a very large impact on me. So I have held that very close to my heart because there was something about the incongruity of that that was beautiful, and it propelled me forward in some way. That why I picked Salzburg, why I picked to go there, why I picked any of it, I don't know. What I can tell you is that that experience is etched on my soul as having been pivotal in starting to push me forward.
One of my favorite types of coincidences is under the category of human GPS, that we end up being someplace and we don't know how we got there, and it works out quite famously, quite well. And the way you said, I don't know, I got to Salzburg, I don't know how I got this. There's something that drew you there, is easy for me to say, because it can look back and say that's how it happened. But I think there's something forward being drawn to what you need if you pay attention to your inner voice. I'm going to Europe in July, and I'm very interested in what's going to happen. It's just like I'm giving a talk on synchronicity in London, but it's like then what? When I might go to Copenhagen and then go to some place a couple hours out of Copenhagen where I know a synchronicity person, or what, or go to a small village in England. I don't know, but it's part of what you're just talking about, is like, okay, throw yourself out there and see what happens. You do have to decide eventually that you're going to go to the castle, for example, and you don't know why you decided that, but it's beautiful, and you I imagine love beautiful things, and that, okay, it's beautiful. And did you know that was going to be the water surprise there?
No.
No.
I went in knowing nothing other than it was called the Trick Castle. And I was like, oh, that sounds cool. I'm like up for an adventure. I don't know what that means, but whatever. It sounds cool. And
well, Trick Castle was a hint that there was something going to happen there, that you didn't know what it was. So you were ready for a surprise. You were ready for something to happen. And what you were in that state of your life, just overwhelmed with death all around you, including in yourself, and then recovering somehow. But after that happens, you still say, well, that could have happened in the other direction. I could not be walking around here. And so it makes life look pretty different. And it makes you maybe think about an adventure in life. And so you did it. So this trick castle, TRICK castle, caught your attention because you were ready to be surprised and have something different happen to you. And so you walked around amazed at the beauty of the garden, a large garden. And then again, and then again. And it was incongruous, as you said, between the beauty and the, what are they doing with this water thing? But you kept going and it had an indelible impact on you. It was a major part, it seems, to what you developed later in your book and your satisfaction and the list of things you told us about. How did those surprises, those incongruous surprises, I'll call them coincidences because you didn't know how they happened. You're walking along, you get hit. You don't know when. You know that there's something behind it. So there's not exactly a coincidence because there's a cause for it somehow. But for you, it was just out of nowhere. Just out of nowhere. How how did that impact you?
I mean, I think it was a metaphor for so many things. I think that it was a metaphor for what I had been through. I had been through like uh, being ambushed, like the Water was ambushing me. Had been ambushed by what happened to my son. I had been ambushed by what happened to me, and then my father's passing. It was also a metaphor for the fact that, the opposite metaphor, which is that um, you can be ambushed by fun things too. So it was a metaphor for like what I had been through, but it was also a metaphor for the fact that, okay, but you could be ambushed at the same, going forward by positive things and things that make you laugh and things that are fun. So I think it was a metaphor for the reverse as well. So it was showing me the other side of the coin too, that it works both ways. So I think that it was a metaphor for both at the same time. Like, this is where you've come from, but this is where you can go to.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's well said about the walk through life, especially in a beautiful garden, and that you can see that you're in a beautiful garden now. And if you can see that, and you can expect there's going to be things happening, but there was another thing I'd add is that after you get ambushed in a negative way, you can still keep walking through the garden.
Mhm. Right. Right.
Well, I'm silent on this one because I think it's such a beautiful uh, description of walking through life.
Mhm.
Uh, it, and there's so many little pictures I get just walking around in the forest and stuff happens. That happened with me walking with in the forest and almost like of water, but it was a vibe of energy thing, and it was these two trees sending energy at me, and that was like 11, 12 years ago, and we've developed a relationship over the time since then. I go up and visit them, and we dance, and they tell me stuff, and I sing to them, and it all started with this swoosh along the path, not unlike what your sprayer at the Trick Castle was doing. What as I described a metaphor in reality for me. Where has this metaphor played out for you since then?
I mean, how it has played out is that I have been focused on mindfulness and gratitude about all of the things that I can do to um with whatever time, like, life seems different now to me because of what I've been through. So, but not in a bad way necessarily, just in a way that I need to embrace it very meaningfully and intentionally. And I feel a lot of gratitude every day. And I feel like I want to spread a message very intentionally. So I feel I learned a lot about satisfaction, how to be resilient, about how to achieve satisfaction. And to the best of my ability, I want to share that with people. And so most of my spare time is spent coming up with creative methods to continue to spread the word about that, so that in the like as in the metaphor of the spray being like continuing to like ambush me in a good way, I keep coming up with creative ideas to like, if I'm still here, like it's for a reason. And I'm going to keep like trying to have people focus on satisfaction and not happiness, because within satisfaction is more resilience than happiness. And change the vernacular so that people are focusing on something that's actually achievable, and give them the tools to get there. And that in that way, maybe people will be less focused on trying to achieve an emotion that's unachievable, and then maybe become less despairing and feel like they're failing less at becoming happy, and work towards doing that. It gives me like a very strong purpose.
Having a strong purpose is so delightful, really. You know what okay, this is what I'm here. Okay, this is what I'm doing. Okay. I'm doing this not happiness but satisfaction thing. That's me. I got the guts to do that. I'm the Gutman. I'm gonna do it. And you're gonna do that. That's what you do. That's what you do. I do the synchronicity thing. Okay, that's what I do. It's like it's nice to be drawn to something and then to expect, which I do too, that I'm going to get squirted with something that's going to help me in what I'm doing.
Mhm.
And that's what you've learned to be able to do, is to be on the lookout for the stuff that can be useful. And the remarkable thing for our listeners and viewers to know is a lot of that information is inside of Jennifer Guttman, or inside of Bernie Beitman, or inside of whoever is you are, that information can come through you. It may not even be in you. It could be coming from somewhere around you, picking up stuff that's from your environment, but not like just the noise out there, but there's something for you. And after a while, you don't know where it's coming from because you're part of the whole thing. And that's part of the fun of it too. It doesn't matter. At least it's a good idea to be able to do the idea that you came up with.
Exactly. Right. And yeah, and that's what gives, I think that also plays into like I think it also, you can draw on that energy, I think. And I think drawing on that energy also then helps keep the like, I think drawing on that energy adds to life satisfaction, adds to like feeling liberated and affirmed, and then that just adds to like the drive towards whatever you purposefully want to spread the word about. So like, if I'm spreading the word about a satisfaction revolution, I think that the energy I feel from what's around me and the fact that I can have these creative thoughts about how to do it just continues to fuel my desire to do it, because the feedback that I'm getting around me is keep going.
That energy, that energy, that energy is like, how do you understand that energy that feeds back on you, and that when you do what you're doing, then you do it, and then the energy comes back, and it's like a feedback loop in a positive direction. How do you understand that energy that you're talking about?
I don't know that there's a way to explain I don't know that there's a way to explain everything. Like sometimes I'm comfortable not being able to explain things that impact me other than knowing that there are I know that when I end my day, sometimes and I could work a 12-hour day, a 14-hour day, be tired at the end of the day, but I also know before I go to bed that while I'm sleeping, I will be drawing energy enough to wake up the next morning super excited to start it all over again. That there won't be a morning where I wake up and I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I have to do this again. Like that's not going to happen. So whatever it is that I'm drawing on, I have faith that it will continue to be affirming, encouraging, and continue to push me forward, and know that because of how it makes me feel. And I know it because when I sit in silence and think creative thoughts, it continues to drive me in that direction. And even when I don't understand why something worked out the way that it did, later on when I figured out the coincidence still demonstrates that the path is still forwards, not neutral or backwards.
There's such an optimism in you, Jennifer.
I mean, I think that when you believe in the universe giving you signs, and you have faith that there is something in that, and then also, like, I do believe that the sustainable life satisfaction techniques also, like, I think the combination of those two things yield an optimistic outlook. I am an optimistic person, and I think that, and I did a YouTube series on optimism. I mean, I do think that those things together, like, coalesce to yield optimism.
Satisfaction. And I didn't ask you, what do you mean by satisfaction?
Satisfaction is that feeling that you get when you set out to do a task and you finish it at the end of a really productive day, when you finish a really good book, when you curl up all cozy on the couch. Satisfaction is different for everybody, but what it isn't is the dopamine hit that you get when you're happy. So what's important about satisfaction is that it's reliable, it's long lasting, it's achievable, and it's how most of us can feel a lot of the time. And so because of that, we can use tools to strive for that. And our brains are always listening to everything that we say. So if we wake up in the morning and strive to be satisfied in a given day and talk about being satisfied, our brains are like, oh, I could probably do that. But if we wake up in the morning, we're like, I want to be happy today, that's just not going to happen. That would be like waking up in the morning and saying, I'm going to be sad all day today. Like, nobody would wake up and say that. But people do believe that they should wake up and be happy all day. And then it's no surprise that people get frustrated when there's a lot of things about their lives that aren't making them happy, because it's impossible. But if they looked at their lives and were hoping that their relationships and their jobs and the parties they go to and all these things were making them satisfied instead of happy, their outlook about their lives would change so drastically, and it would be so liberating. And so it's about it's about changing the vernacular, and then asking yourself, changing what you're looking to get out of each day. Of course, you're going to have moments of happiness. We all do, just like we have moments of sadness. But happiness is a feeling. And so, like any feeling, it comes and goes. Satisfaction is stable state.
Satisfaction is a stable state.
Yeah.
I can't get no satisfaction, Jennifer.
It's so funny that you say that, and yet it's so funny because like it's like you say that, but I say like people can be satisfied. And I opened a popcorn bag the other day, and it says, "You eat this popcorn, you will be happy." I'm like, "Are you kidding? Seriously? It says on this popcorn bag that if I eat this popcorn, I'm going to be happy? Like satisfied, maybe if I eat the popcorn, but happy? Like this is the propaganda that's out there telling people how easy it is to be happy."
Ah, well, the Stones tell us you can't get no satisfaction, but you can
I
get
know
what
they do.
you get what you need, which is a start. I mean, it's like
That is
that's
that's absurd.
well, that's satisfying to get what you need. That's what's and anyway, we can play with that one, but yeah, that's what you're singing. You're singing a song that looks like it isn't what the Stones are saying, but I think it has some resemblance to it.
Yeah.
Well, we're coming to the end of our time together, and I would think, what else what would you like to leave our audience with?
I would say that try to get in touch with your try to quiet the noise around you so that if it's possible to get in touch with your intuitive self, you will find a, a lot of meaning there and you'll find it incredibly liberating. And that within things like my sustainable life satisfaction techniques, there's tools that you can use to quiet the noise, but it's critically important to quiet all of the stuff around you if you want to get in touch with your intuitive self, because you have to more loosely ground yourself from the environment in order to hear and listen to the meaning that the universe is trying to tell you.
That's coming through you if you're quiet enough to be able to pay attention to it and discern it. And you really talked about how much practice it takes to be able to do that. There's a lot of stuff floating around that comes into people's heads, and they need an observer in there. They need to activate that self-observer that you're describing. And I think that self-observer deserves more and more attention, that we should be paying attention to that observing self or self-observer because it's so important in helping us discriminate what comes through.
Yeah.
Now, since you are very much a describer of the activity of the self-observer, it suggests to me that there is an observer in you of your self-observer.
um, I mean, I never thought about it, but maybe there is an observer of
There is. I hear it talking because it's describing what the self-observer is doing.
Oh, okay.
So it's you're saying this is what it does. I send it out as a astral body or something to be outside of me. Well, you're observing it going outside of you. Oh, look, hi, are you out there? Okay, well,
True.
see what you got here. It what do you think of that idea that there might be a second self-observer?
I mean, I think that if there is, the more distance I can get from what's grounding me to the environment, the more helpful it's going to be to get to meaning. So great, because otherwise I'm going to get bogged down. And the whole point is for me to not get bogged down. Really want the creative thoughts, and I really want to hear what like else is going on in my mind. We use such a small portion of our brains. I want to know what else is going on in there to the best of my ability. And like, and some of that can be informed by the universe, and some of it can be like taken in by me, like absorbing more stimuli than I'm consciously aware that I'm absorbing.
Yeah, you are in a liberation movement, Jennifer. You are trying to liberate the self of something, whatever you call the you that's kind of floating around in there, or observing. They get mixed up sometimes from all the other stimuli that come into us. And it's a marvelous approach you have about naming all these different things that are coming in from the environment, from their own bodies even, and from other people, as well as our own self-talk in its various forms. And you're saying, no, let's move them away. And what do you have?
All we have left is our thoughts and just us.
Thank you very much, Jennifer Guttman, for being with me on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. It was so much fun.
Good.
This psychosphere is our mental atmosphere, like a hologram of cosmic consciousness.